Well, this came highly requested, so I will traverse to the deepest corners of my mind and plunder through great personal trauma in order to bring you the story of the greatest cheating scandal in competitive Pokemon history. And I feel very strange calling it the greatest, but it's accurate, I guess. There is one other incident that might challenge it for that title, but fear not, that'll be covered in a different video. This video, however, tells the story of the 2017 edition of the Smogon Premier League. For those who don't know, SPL is a team tournament. You have managers, they have virtual money, they choose to spend, they bid on players, and then you put your team together, and then you work together and try and win. It's a blast. It's the greatest tournament. It keeps players who would have otherwise been long retired coming back year after year after year. And it's a great social event, as well as a competitive experience. It's the best of what Smogon tournaments have to offer. However, like many other Smogon tournaments, it has been marred by an incident of uncouth behavior. Let's be polite. And part of that is to be expected because, we're a bunch of dorky teenagers and 20-somethings playing video games on the internet. So some of that is to be expected. And matter of fact, some would say that's part of the appeal, seeing all the dumb stuff that happens. But there are some incidents that just go above and beyond, and this is one of them. So, what you see on the screen before you are the teams that were participating in this edition of SPL. The way it works is that you have 9 weeks of regular season competition, and at the end of those 9 weeks, the 4 teams with the most points go to the playoffs. And there they slug it out for the championship. Now, you may have surmised from my opening where I mentioned deep personal trauma that I might have been personally involved in this. That's very accurate. So I will attempt to, at first, provide a neutral picture of the events that occurred. But eventually, fair warning, I am going to get very, very annoyed because this did personally affect me and many others who were similarly furious. So, fair warning, this is not an entirely unbiased account. In fact, it still makes me pretty mad to think about. But first, let's get to the facts. Okay, so SPL 8, the Team Raiders were the best team in the league, as you see there, by their record of 8 wins, 0 losses, and 1 tie, which still has yet to be beat for a regular season record. That was my team, so I was a big fan of being on the Raiders. Hard to imagine, I know. But yes, the Raiders were killing it that season. Everyone was doing really well. Then the Bigs were a great team. The Scooters were also one of the best teams. And they were really clawing to fight into those playoffs. And then the final team, the Circus Maximus Tigers. So some background on the Tigers. Historically, they had been this was SPL 8. And for pretty much every other SPL, they had been terrible. With the exception of Season 4, where they were the best team in the league and made it to the finals. But every other season, they were pretty bad. And in SPL 8, they started out pretty bad as well. Not badly, but definitely not playoff material. They had McMegan and Tamahome and several other great players, so they had the potential, but they really weren't living up to it for most of the season. They started out the first 6 weeks. They started with a record of 2 wins, 3 losses, and 1 tie. So playoffs were still within reach, but it was going to be tough. Now, before we get to before we get to what changed and what allowed them to vault themselves into that fourth slot and make playoffs, we have to examine the player who this is all about, Mazar. So you see here, that record, 7-2, 3K. Well, that's pretty amazing. But going into this tournament, Mazar, why was he 3K if he was that good? Well, because he was a shamed cheater. Now, I am not shaming anyone who's ever cheated, obviously. There's a long, long history of cheating on Smogon, and it's understandable. I get why. The culture has shifted away from that. Thank God. For a long time, it looked like it was never going to change. But there were some incidents which were way worse than others. And Mazar had previously been banned not a year before this tournament started. He had been banned for receiving ghosting to win the Grand Slam, the individual lower tiers tournament. He got a trophy for it and everything, and not after. It was like, oh, yeah, his friend actually did a little more than just help him win. Pretty much did the whole thing for him, or close to that. Actually, and it wasn't just his friend. It was others. So everyone was pretty upset that he only got a 6-month ban for that, because this was when people were saying, all right, enough is enough. We've been having cheating scandals nonstop. Let's start making a change. Let's really, as a community, work together and eliminate this 6-month ban. And it was a matter of policy, and it doesn't really matter. Point is that he went into this SPL. He was a talented player too. A lot of the players that wind up doing stuff like this, it's like, why? You were a good player. And we'll talk about why later. That will definitely be explored, because it is a subject of fascination. So, like, most players, and I do not exempt myself from this, who play on Smogon, especially if you played before the last couple of years, will participate in cheating of some kind. Not even because they want to cheat, but just because the culture used to be so that you would just get drawn into it naturally. Like, most commonly, talking with your teammates during a team tournament game. It was when you started, there was a line that was, that you weren't supposed to cross. Not really important. But point is that if you have a gang to help you win an individual tournament, that's a little much. But, no one held a serious grudge against Mazar going into SPL 8. It was like, all right, well, he's reformed. He learned his lesson. I mean, kids on the internet playing video games, yeah, they're going to do dumb stuff like this. Forgive and forget. And if he's reformed and he just wants to play some Pokemon, that's fine. There are plenty of great players now who needed a second or even a third chance, and now they're more than fine. So, Mazar going into this tournament was, a good player, but had his problems. So how did the Tigers season start off? Well, we know they started off 2-3-1. So how did those first 6 weeks go for Mazar? Well, first week he lost to Ray Scarface when the Tigers played the Raiders. Then he sat on the bench for week 2. Then for week 3 he played PDC and won. This was in Sun and Moon OU. Then in week 4 he played Lycans. I never know how to pronounce that name, but he played Lycans also in Sun and Moon OU. And also lost. So his record is 1-2 after 4 weeks with one on the bench. Then he sits on the bench for week 6. Sits on the bench for week 5 and 6. And then he comes in Sun and Moon Ubers in week 7. And this is where the Tigers turned their season around. See, week 7, they battled to a tie. So then their record is 2-3-2. So they have to win the last 2 weeks to make playoffs. And they do win those last 2 weeks, and that's how they make the playoffs. Okay, well, those are against some fierce opponents, too. The Scooters especially. Beating the Scooters? Yikes. So Mazar, in these 3 weeks, he gets 3 wins. Level 56, Gunnar Rohan, and Fireburn. All very respectable Ubers players. Matter of fact, level 56 was one of the best players on Smogon, period, at the time. So that was a shock for a guy who had been... was 1-2 and then was sitting on the bench for 3 weeks total. And then to come out with such a when we'll look at the Gunnar Rohan game, and people were starting to be shocked because he wasn't just winning, he was dominating, and there was something a little off about it, but at this point, it wasn't really something you would notice unless you played him. And you wouldn't want to bring up, hey, there's something funny about this, because then you, like right after you lose, because then you would look like a sore loser. But we'll get to that. So, point being, he beats level 56, and then he gets to Gunnar Rohan, and that's the first game we're going to examine. So, what happens here is that we've got some offense and some offense. So Deoxys' speed at this point, or pretty much always Stealth Rock, Spikes, whatever. Stealth Rock and Spikes, pretty much. And instead, what Mazar has here is a dual screen Deoxys into an Ingrain Xerneas. For hyper offense, that's pretty unusual, but it just so happens to unusual in the sense that it's not a bad Xerneas set by any means, but that in conjunction with dual screen Deoxys is kind of overkill and only really makes sense if you are really, there's gunning for matchup fishing, and then there's, well, at this point, it's too early to tell. There's something weird about this. It's unusual, but you could theoretically just chalk it up to, oh, this guy just went matchup fishing really hard. And you could say, oh, well, he's dumb for matchup fishing that hard. He's lucky that it worked out. But you also might think there's something weird about that. I'm sure because this is not the last time we will see Gunnar Rohan. And matter of fact, he is one of the most important characters in this story. But we'll get back to that. So yeah, this Reflect-supported Ingrain Z Geomancy Xerneas sweeps Gunnar's entire team. And yeah, and poor Gunnar, actually. Because another reason that people are starting to get suspicious of Mazar's sudden success was not just because of something Mazar did, because of something someone else did that was associated with him. So, poor Gunnar, again, because this is his game against the Trap God, who was a friend of Mazar's, and this was the week after. And so Gunnar's bringing some Smeargle offense, Sticky Web, whatever Smeargle did. And the Trap God has a Terrakion lead, and Smeargle with Focus Sash, I think it uses Nuzzle or something to get past faster taunt leads, because it needs Sash, so you can't run Mental Herb on it. But this Terrakion happens to have Double Kick, which is frankly ridiculous. And people were saying, okay, this is kind of, absurd. And then sets up rocks, and now Gunnar... Oh, a Taunt Toxic Double Kick Terrakion. You could say, oh, it's just very specialized, it's just matchup fishing, and no one wants to look like a sore loser and say someone leaked my team or something like that. But a team leak wasn't exactly what was happening here. Or what people thought was happening here. As in comes Solgaleo. Even Solgaleo is unusual. Pretty early on it was accepted. Yeah, that is not a great Pokemon in early Gen 7 Ubers. It wasn't unviable, though. It wasn't suspicious unless you're being conditioned to look for suspicious things because of a Double Kick Terrakion. So, then another Xerneas. Oh, with HP Ground, too. Now, that's not that unusual, but the way everything comes together so perfectly is what really had people thinking something's weird here. And then in the final, and we have more games to go through, so we're not going to go through all of them. We didn't go through level 56 game, because that one was fairly normal, although I'm sure some more experienced Gen 7 Ubers players might find something weird. Myself, it's been a while since I've dabbled seriously in that tier, so I don't think I could offer anything strange. But then you had, in week 9, Mazar played Fireburn, and he had a Whirlpool Perish Song Arceus against Stall, and it started, players started be weirded out. Like, this guy gets a lot of really good matchups. And he seems to know his opponent's sets. And then the trap got, and then this thing with the double kick Terrakion also had people thinking, what is going on here? So now we move to the semifinals. Mazar's game against Hack. And this is where it gets personal for me. I'll refrain from getting too furious because I know what's happening. But yeah, this is where it never really struck us that something weird was going on. But the point is that DOS, and in comes a Swords Dance sub reversal baton pass Blaziken. So let me just... yeah, this Blaziken has sub SD and reversal and baton pass. So, which is the most ridiculous, because it would... I'm going to stop myself there. I hope it's very clear why this is so ridiculous. To bring in SPL semis at that. If someone brought this in SPL semis and it went south, which it probably would in most situations, because it's one of the gimmickiest sets imaginable, then they would be crucified. I would be so furious if a teammate of mine did this. But of course it worked out because he knows Hack's entire team, so he knows that he can get it set up perfectly. Just hoping... And he even... this whole thing is making me furious. Yeah. Oh, and he misses Precipice Blades, and is there hope? I don't think so. No, because it's... Yeah. So, Ground Arceus, and... I mean, one of the things that made people think, all right, well, he's just really good at matchups, because it's not like he's bringing... Like, recently, in a side tournament, then some player knew he was facing Rain, and in Gen 8 OU, and he brought a team that was like Shedinja and 3 Water Absorbers and Chansey, and it was so clearly meant to only destroy Rain, and it would lose to like an NU team, probably. What Mazar is doing here is not quite that. It's just... I mean, it's because these are like standard sets of hyper offense teams, but the matchups he's getting repeatedly are just a little too perfect, and people are really starting to wonder. And then it happened again in SPL finals. So at this point, he's got a record of 5-0 in Sun and Moon Ubers with perfect matchups and knowledge of opponent sets. Like, yeah, I don't. Sorry, I'm trying to overcome my fear. Yeah, so he knows he has his matchups, but nothing too egregious. Then he wins again in SPL finals, and we're gonna skip ahead. This is SPL finals tiebreak. This is the deciding game. It was 1-1 at this point. So whoever wins this wins SPL for their team. And Mazar brings out some... So previously to this, he's been running a lot of offensive stuff. Now he busts out stall. Okay, interesting. But, so here we've got Sableye, Dio Speed, Ho-Oh, Sableye is bouncing back, Stealth Rock, okay. And, we've got Gunner making a great move and CCing the Ho-Oh to try and catch Arceus Ground coming in. Mazar switching out of the... Now, I don't even know if this Lucario is Stone Edge, because it never ran Stone Edge. So, Ho-Oh switching out there, you know what? You can never know fully. That's why this whole incident is so obscene. Anyway, so Ho-Oh comes in on Zern and then pivots into Groudon to a KO'd by Moonblast. And Magearna is going to get a Heart Swap here, doesn't really matter. Groudon comes in. And now, here's where it really becomes strange. Ho-Oh switches into a Primal Groudon, and there's a Lugia there, which is weird. And so this is where a lot of alarm bells started going off. How does he know that Primal Groudon doesn't have Stone Edge? Now, he switches Ho-Oh into it and then keeps it in. And it's not even like he needs to, like, Ho-Oh is useless. What does sacrificing Ho-Oh to Stone Edge do? What difference does that make? Because normally you would just answer it with your Lugia, right? Or your Arceus Ground. But he wants to preserve it for the other Pokemon. And normally the idea, and if someone sends this to Gunnar, I hope he explains the details of his games in the comments. Because obviously he understands personally why this is so weird. But from my perspective, a couple years later, the whole idea is that you do not... I mean, okay, Arceus Ground and Lugia... First of all, he is a fantastic matchup against this team, even without knowing the sets. But with the power of Gen 7 Uber's pokes, then there's always some sort of risk. Like, if I go to Arceus Ground, then I might be more vulnerable to Lucario or something later. Or, if Ho-Oh gets sacked to Groudon, then Lucario becomes more dangerous. Yveltal becomes more dangerous. The point is, there's no real reason to potentially sacrifice your Ho-Oh there, because you still need it, especially when you have better checks. And instead, Gunnar just SDs, and the Ho-Oh stays in Toxics, and just stays in again, so just knowing that it's EQ, Fire Punch, Double Dance, and nothing with Stone Edge. And that's where, even I didn't think, he's cheating at this time, but I was like, that's weird that he knows that somehow. I don't know if that's like a team composition thing, but I don't know, because Ho was kind of a big deal in Gen 7 Ubers, because it could defog now, and you had all these defog armies running around, so yeah, you had to run Stone Edge. It's your strongest move against Mega Salamence. So to just assume like that just felt very strange. So now he Magic Coats and Toxics the Sableye, but it's still not going to be enough because the matchup is just ridiculous, even without playing like he knows the sets. Psychic Lugia, that also felt a little strange, because, and it's Arceus Ground, so Lugia is even more amazing here. So preserve the Lugia to keep it against Arceus Ground and not risk it against the Dual Dance Groudon, which he knew he could because of So that's where it's like, it shouldn't have been that riskless, but it was. And Psychic Lugia to actually hit Mega Lucario, and that's just... you could say, it's for Mega Gengar or something, but I'm pretty sure Mega Gengar or Lugia did not run Psychic very often. But, of course, it hits Lucario neutrally. It was Stone Edge Lucario. Okay, well, I haven't watched this replay in years, but that is that's horrifying, actually. That this Lucario actually had Stone Edge to answer Ho-Oh, and Mazar... And I remember, I actually played Gen 7 Ubers in this SPL twice. So I was up to date at my movesets at the time. And Lucario was SD, Close Combat, Iron Tail, Bullet Punch. So Stone Edge, to know that he's Stone Edge like that. So if we go back to what turn was it? If we go back to turn 5, so not only does he not... You could say, he's just being smart and risking... I don't know, it's that in conjunction with everything else. Now, of course, just knowing this, or just thinking, hey, something is suspicious here, is not ground. I would not be making this video if all there was to this was suspicion. Like, hey, this guy's sets are a little too perfect, his moves are a little too knowing of what his opponent's sets are. That is, of course, not basis for this. But the fact that Gunnar used CC there, you could say, he knew Mazar would scout and he made an intelligent move. It still feels like he knows he's getting cheated against. With hindsight, of course. But then we go back to the turn we were on, 29. So this Lucario does, in fact, SD, and the Lugia... See, this would be even more terrifying if the Lugia had actually, or even the Arceus had actually been forced to fight the Groudon, like it might in most cases. Still needed a Spadef drop, although with Arceus ground at that point, then, and it being a special ground CS, meaning it's walled by Ho-Oh, then yeah, and that's gonna be the game. And that won the Tigers SPL, and everyone was like, "Oh well, what a redemption story for Mazar, going from a laughed at cheater to going 6-0 in Sun and Moon Ubers, including wins against some of the most decorated players in the metagame, and clutching for his team over and over and over again. He really led this Tigers team." Well, the Scooters had a feeling something was up, and thankfully they did not relent in their investigation. So now we go to the big reveal. Well, okay, so Mazar, so was someone inside the Scooters leaking? But then you think, hey, that doesn't make any sense, because he had this every week against all of his teams. So now we're going to get to the reveal. And before that, I'd like to ask you to consider, that command on Showdown where if you want to hide a game, you can hide it? For example, like if you're testing a team for a tournament and you don't want random spectators on Showdown to come watch, you do that command, /IONEXT, right? IONEXT. Or even if you're laddering, you can do that thing where, that's obviously more risky. But point is, you can hide your games on Showdown now, right? Why do you think that is? Well, I'll tell you. In October of that year, so this SPL was concluded in early April of 2017. Then in October of 2017, it was finally revealed. And this is a forum post, so I won't make you read it. So I will read it for you. So, the TD team, the tournament director team, has obtained evidence that Mazar used a stratagem to obtain his opponent's teams prior to his or his teammates' games. So, for those who don't know what a stratagem is, it was a bot, basically. Okay, so, quoting again, it went as such. A bot was able to join battles before they were hidden on the main Showdown server. Because before, this is me interjecting again, before you could hide your games, but you had to do it after. You had to wait until the game was done, and then you could hide the replay. But you couldn't hide the game itself from being joined. Anyway, so reading again. The bot was able to join battles before they were hidden on the main Showdown server. The bot joined those under a guest account, so no join messages showed when it did. Mazar used this bot to collect teams from potential opponents, and as such he could gain an incredible advantage. This bot could join games in huge masses to a point where Mazar himself described it as it could work for any tier except OU because of the volume. So in short, he was literally finding his opponent's teams because they would be tested, because, for SPL you test, and he would eventually be able to find what his opponents were using and build a perfect counter team to it. And he knew the sets and everything. And as a result of this, he was able to go undefeated. And that's pretty horrifying already. And you wonder, because it was pretty suspicious how he goes from being 1-2 into being benched in OU to suddenly killing Ubers. It's like, oh, is the competition in Ubers that much worse? No, not quite. He was he literally he was using this bot to collect his opponent's teams and build the perfect counter team. And you would think, oh, well, that's just one win. How can one player? Yeah, and it doesn't quite end there, because I go on to quote, we have proof that Mazar used the bot to gain teams for his teammates' games too. For instance, we have screens showing that he was able to obtain an opponent's teams and, via an intermediate, influence his teammates' team choice for the match. The match in question resulted in a win for the Tigers. That was just one. So basically, he was not only getting free wins for himself, but he was really helping his teammate. He was helping his teammates get really good matchups. Oh, well, why are the Tigers suddenly winning so much when they were struggling to stay afloat before? Well, maybe because this guy literally has their opponent's teams. I go on to quote from the post. During his finals game, Mazar gave a teammate a team that was identical to the one Gunnar Rohan used to test. Given that we know the existence of the bot, how it worked, and the fact Mazar chained perfect matchups and had a seemingly supernatural ability to guess his opponent's sets during his games, it's safe to assume Mazar used said bot in all his Ubers games for SPL. These all resulted in wins for Mazar, all 6 of them. So, to reiterate, he went 6-0 in Ubers, using these, knowing his opponent's teams, and he helped his teammates out in non-OU tiers quite a bit. What was the finals? It doesn't matter. I'm not gonna say make a difference. I'm not gonna differentiate. It's like, oh, was their OU record worse? I wonder why. But I do remember the Scooters OU winning a lot in, well, besides the tiebreak. But doesn't even matter. I'm getting sidetracked because of how furious this makes me so many years later. Because the Raiders went from killing everyone in the regular season to suddenly having horrible matchup after horrible matchup in the semifinals. And the Scooters found themselves similarly plagued. And the Tigers went from being bad to or mediocre to being this SPL winning force. I'm not saying they cheated all their games, obviously, but a significant chunk of their wins came from this. Anyway, go on to quote the post again. It goes without saying that using such stratagems goes against everything tournaments stand for. This offense is so fundamentally bad that it warrants cancellation of the entire tournament, considering how much it was used and that it was used by Mazar for more than one match every week. This whole situation is very regrettable. The TD team would apologize for coming to this, but at this point there is no better option. In light of the situation, Zeril added a new command to Showdown. /IonNext will make your next battle invite only automatically. This can be used to avoid such incidents and keep your teams and test games safe. The result, Mazar will be banned from the Smogon forums permanently. The Circus Maximus Tigers will have their trophy removed. SPL 8's result is nullified. Yeah. So, pretty infuriating, because that was my favorite SPL ever. And to have it, I mean, because you generally assume, in those days anyway, you assumed that your opponent was ghosting in certain matchups. So, like I'm not going to name any names because that's not the point. But in some games you would know, okay, well, this guy's clearly a ghosting slot, so we have to take into account that we're really playing someone else. That's at least something you can prepare for. Because at the end of the day, you know, even if, obviously, ghosting is bad and shouldn't be allowed, but the point is, you can theoretically, even if, the most messed up part is when you don't know who you're playing, and then, because it does make a difference, but there is something you can do to, if you're fighting someone who's ghosting. You can just play really well and theoretically win anyway. But if someone else knows your team and has, I mean, there's only so much you can do. So, yeah, that was infuriating. But, on the bright side, there is a bright side to this. There's a nice ending. Because a few months later, Brofist played Mazar for the deciding game in the tiebreak of round 2, of the first round of the playoffs in the World Cup. US East against Germany. And Brofist was one of the managers of the Scooters. And he believed his players when they told, like Gunnar, I believe, who was like, dude, this guy is cheating. There's something funny going on. Like with all this and the double kick Terrakion. I mean, something, they are getting teams somehow. We don't know how it's happening, but there is some form of cheating going on. And he and CBB believed it, and they pursued it, and that's why it was investigated. Now, I don't know how it was discovered. I'm going to assume that I would love any clarification, but I am going to assume that it was the way that most cheaters get caught. Well, there are two ways. It's that someone leaked, but B, they brag about it. That actually happened a surprising amount. And it used to not be punishable to brag about it. But yeah, Mazar was... I think Mazar was bragging about it somewhere, and someone was like, all right, maybe we should look into this. So, yeah. Yeah, and he wasn't exactly apologetic for what he did after, either, which was... also left a pretty bad taste in my mouth. And just for this video, this is special. This is exclusive. But I was talking to M Dragon a few days ago after I made the video about the Scooters Raiders drama. And he told me something that I had no idea about before. Let me quote it. Yeah, okay. He said, I never told anyone, but before that SPL, someone on a random alt PM'd me and asked me if using a bot to compile replays was legal or not. And then M Dragon was like, no, it's not. But, you know, he didn't know it was Mazar because it was an alt. And he thought it was a joke. And it was not in any sort of SPL context. But, yeah, that just makes it even worse, so... this was... oh my god. Anyway, and yeah, it wouldn't work for OU because... actually, that's the funny thing about it. It doesn't work for OU because there's too many OU games on the main server. Whereas in other tiers, then, yeah. The Tigers condemned Mazar's actions, though. Thank God. But yeah. Anyway, so we get back to this Brofist versus Mazar game to decide U.S. East versus Northeast. U.S. East versus Germany in the first round of the playoffs of the World Cup a couple months later. And we're not going to go through the whole game, but pretty much Brofist, the clutch god, rocks, doing awesome stuff. Some sort of Z Latios. Oh, he's using M Dragon nicknames. I remember. That's funny. Look at that heart swap Magirna. Beautiful. Mrs. Floor Cannon. Who cares? Pretty sure Brofist was playing this immaculately anyway. So, Healing Wish, and then there's this Calm Mind Ward. Oh, there's a Garchomp. So who knows if that's even gonna... oh, and Floor Cannon. Oh, yeah. Oh, so then the Clefable wins the Calm Mind War with a crit. And Mazar decides to start getting mouthy. Easted. Yeah. Anyway. So, pretty sure Brofist was... oh, and he's getting really mouthy because he's... well, actually, you know, before... this reminded me of something I wanted to mention earlier, because I was thinking, you know, because I think this drive to win the approval of the Smogtours chat. Earlier, I mentioned that we would return to why would someone cheat to this scale? Because earlier I also said, oh well, a lot of cheating, it just kind of happens. Like you're talking with your buddies about the game that's going on, and it just kind of happens. And sometimes you just really want to win, but you still want to play the game. But this, like with ghosting, then most of the time the person actually winning doesn't get credit for the win. It goes to someone else, and then that some people brag about it, and that's how they get caught. But that's not really the point here. The point here is that this whole need to win the approval of the Smogtours chat is the bane of many a player who enters the Smogon tournament, of course. But I remember Teal6 had a great post about this when there was a lot of debate about. And I think Bedshabear had a great post about it too, but also Teal. And I wonder if I can find it actually. Actually, you know what? I am going to go looking for it. So give me 2 seconds. I didn't think I was going to access this, which is why I'm not prepared. But this is very relevant, and we will return to that game, no worries. Beds was a great guy. So, there was this thread which was... Oh no, I can't find it. Oh, that's terrible. Maybe it's because I'm not logged in. Okay, well, I will find it and I will link it in the pinned in a pinned comment. But the general idea was that Teal made this post about the level to which people are cheating was connected to the level to which people were playing OLT. Like, people were laddering for like 24 hours straight because they needed to qualify that badly. Because the idea was that in OLT, you would they wanted to not reveal the deadline, so there wouldn't be a last minute rush. But this had the counterintuitive effect where people would ladder for like, I'm serious, close to 24 hours straight to try and qualify because they didn't know when the deadline was. And the point Teal was making was that there was a terrifying level of validation that people were putting into their online Pokemon, which to some extent is understandable because, it's an escape and whatever. Yeah, I bet you didn't think this was going to get deep, did you? But I'm coming to the point, which was that this level of cheating is so extreme because when you know your opponent's team and build the perfect counter team to it, you are not playing the game anymore. You are really just you're just going through the motions, and all you're really after is that approval of the Smog Tours chat. And that was actually, I think, the turning point in the cheating culture, where cheating started being looked at as like, dude, what are you doing? As opposed to, yeah, let's do it. That came not long after that. I don't know if that post had anything to do with it, but that post always stuck with me because it really captured it perfectly. Because ghosting is, to some extent a natural part of the social event, but to go this far where all you're doing is, like, you can't lose with the matchups you create because you have such an unfair advantage. It's to the extreme extent that you really are just looking for every turn to be, oh my god, look at how good he is. Oh my god, look at that move he made. Oh my god, he set up Reflect. Oh my god, how did he know that this set was perfect? How did he know to make that prediction? How did he... And there's almost none of the actual battling itself left. And so I try to understand Mazar this way, in that he really just wanted the validation of the Smog Tours chat. But then I get really angry because I realize what he did was... Yeah, and that is why I think that this is the most singular instance of cheating in Smogon tournament history. There is that other big contender for the other video, but yeah. Anyway, so... Scarf Chomp. Scarf Chomp was actually used in Gen 7 back then. Anyway, so Brofist wins the game, and he remembered what Mazar was doing, so he left us with this little gem. Because it is true that in OU, and when he couldn't use the bot, then Mazar faltered, and he even after he was banned, he did not show remorse and still hung out like, oh yeah, it's just something I did, whatever. I'm not saying that he has to, go to confession or something, but Jesus Christ. For this, anyway, I've said enough already. So I hope this was an entertaining recap of the greatest cheating scandal in Smogon tournament history. Showdown tournament history. I don't know. People don't differ. People just call it Showdown now. They don't even know what Smogon is. But that's a separate video. I have so many separate videos to make. I'm very excited to delve into all these topics and just start yammering. So I'm very glad Brofist won this game, and I'm even more glad. At the time, I didn't know what he was referring to. I was like, oh, I guess Mazar must... Actually, I guess I just assumed he was referring to Grand Slam or something. But then a couple months later, then the truth came out about using a bot to get your opponent's team so you can perfectly counter team them. That is really special. That is really... Yeah. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I hope you were entertained, and I will catch you next time.